Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for the last session? Are you ready for the last session? It is a bit of a bittersweet thing, right? The last session of an entire week of European Ocean Days. We started on the 3rd of March, it's already the 7th, and I think I can say that this was a very, very important week for everything that has happened, everything that has been discussed. I was just wondering, is anyone here just especially for the Fisheries and Ocean Science Seminar? Yes, someone in the back. Can I have some light in the room, please? A little bit of light in the room? Because I can't see, So put on the lights. Yeah, there we go. Who is here especially for this session? You especially came to Brussels for this session, and then also there. Where are you from? You're from Brussels. You came by bike. Wonderful. And where are you from, sir?
Stockholm.
From Stockholm. Wow. When did you fly in? Oh, you took the train. Then you didn't come through Paris because that was not possible today. Eh? There was an explosive device from the Second World War. I thought it was from the First World War. It was from the Second World War. It has been there for more than 80 years. Go figure. We should do some digging a little bit more. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to do the introduction of this last session, Fisheries and Ocean Science Seminar. Welcome in this venue in Sparks for those who have spent a few days here already. You already know it. I absolutely love this room. Look at these paintings on the wall. This room goes back to the 60s, and it has this real nice atmosphere, so I absolutely love it. I also would like to welcome the people following the live stream. So also you, thank you very much for spending time watching your screen on a Friday afternoon. I hope you do it in a sunny room where you can enjoy the nice weather outside. We're inside, so it's a bit different. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fisheries and Ocean Science Seminar provides a platform for dialogue on the current and future science challenges, as well as a networking opportunity, of course, afterwards for all stakeholders who have an opportunity to reflect on the state of the scientific advice and research on fisheries and the challenges that lie ahead. Now, before we kick it off, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to know who do we have in the room. And for this we have a Slido, so you can take out your smartphone. Yes, the smartphone. And you can scan the QR code. And if you scan the QR code, you are immediately directed to the site slido.com, and you will be asked a specific question, and that is, where are you from? So we would like to know, where are you from? You can type it in Slido right now so that we have a bit of an overview. Italy and France, of course. Slovenia, oh, nice. Yeah, Brussels. Not Belgium, Brussels. The world. Oh, who is from the world? Who said that? Who is this global, this global citizen? A lot of people from Italy. I already saw that in the previous panels, that we had a lot of people from Italy, a lot of people from France. There's a competition going on between France and Italy. Who is going to win? Finland is now getting close, and Belgium, come on, Belgians. Trieste, which is also Italy. Is that not Italy? Huh? The blue planet. Oh, that's nice. And then also someone from Torhout. Who's from Torhout? Was the Vreebees vent. And then we have Lithuania, Portugal, UK, the North Sea. Who's from the North Sea? Yeah, who has gills? So, very nice. Very nice to have you all here, still answers pouring in, and one participant still typing. People from Ireland, who's from Ireland? Here, yeah, on the first row, two from Ireland. And also there's one. And there, oh, nicely represented. So keep on typing, ladies and gentlemen. We go to the second question, because we also want to know, how do you define yourself as a stakeholder? So this is the second question. This is interesting for the panel later on, because we want to know who you are. Are you a scientist, a fisher, a fisheries manager, policymaker, researcher, project coordinator, advocacy, industry, or civil society? Please, how do you define yourself as a stakeholder? No answers coming in for the moment? There we go. Hula. A lot of scientists. I figured already, yeah. 1 out of 3 is a scientist. very interesting for us to know. Policymakers, 15%. Yeah. There's a close race going on between project coordinators, other, and policymakers. There you go. And those who typed other, what exactly is that? Who typed other? Yeah, and what is other? Okay. Okay. Welcome, welcome. How many years do you have still have to go in your studies? 1 year left. Okay. Hey, good luck. Good luck. Anyone else who typed other? Because that's also important for us to know. Who else typed other? Cannot be only one, eh? If it makes like 15% of the audience. Who else typed other? Could be online. Nice one. Yeah, yes. Intelligence, not here. Eh? So we have 26% of scientists. So you can make it a bit scientific, dear panel members, but not too scientific. It's only 1 out of 4 who is a scientist. And then we go to the last question in this poll. What do you hope to take away from this seminar? In one word, what would you like to take away from this seminar? Take it away. So that would be the next question. If we can launch the next one in the Slido. So I don't know if that is possible. What do you hope to, there we go. What do you hope to take away from this seminar in one word? I'm really curious. Some cookies. By the way, that's 2 words. Huh? Data, collaboration, and knowledge, inspiration, absolutely amazing. Weekend is also a very good one. Hope, absolutely nice. Knowledge, I think we can provide that. Yeah. Some clarity. More fish on the sea. Ideas for new projects. Yeah, the limitation of the one word is really, really difficult. But I understand. You're all motivated and driven. So the cookies, that's taken care of. Ideas for new projects, they will get, we will get them. More fish in the sea. We'll do our best, but I think that knowledge and collaboration are also elements that came forward in the previous panels, especially the collaboration. If we were talking about the sharing of data, that we should like breach borders and move on and share everything that we have. So ideas, knowledge, collaboration, I think those are the ones. Still people typing, 6 participants typing. I'm just waiting a little bit more just to know. Self-criticism, that's a nice one. Yeah. What do you hope to take away from this seminar is the moderator. I am not asking any questions. I don't want to know who typed this. But I have to say that I feel very flattered. Thank you very much. Yeah. I can read the newspaper for you in the morning. So there you go. Already making arrangements for the morning. That was not my plan. So there we go. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is time now to kick off this last session of the European Ocean Days. And this introduction will be done by the Deputy Director General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries of the European Commission. Please welcome on stage Kestutis Sadauskas.
For cheering up the audience. In fact, as public administration, European Commission, trying to become a bit more modern, is advising itself not to organize meetings on Friday afternoon so that we can become a bit more family friendly, unless there is a very good reason. And science is a really good reason to keep you guys here in this room among yourselves, or anybody glued to the screen still on this sunny day, at least in Brussels. Because I promise that you will not regret having been through this very last part of the Ocean Days. Indeed, this is really the final event of the Ocean Days, and over the past week, we've come together as an ocean community, policymakers, scientists, stakeholders, civil society, students, whoever have identified themselves on the Slido, to shape the shared vision for the future of our seas that should lead to an ocean pact. This is something that we hope to come out with in 2 months and to really change the game if we can. This pact, the Ocean Pact, aims to be a landmark step to bring coherence in how we collectively manage, protect, and restore our ocean. It will reaffirm our commitments to sustainable blue economy and a thriving marine environment, ensuring that our seas continue to support biodiversity, climate resilience, and the livelihoods of coastal communities. But achieving this vision requires a strong foundation of science. The health of our ocean and sustainability of fisheries depend on robust, transparent, and state-of-the-art scientific knowledge. That is why today's seminar is so important. It offers an opportunity to reflect on the role of science to support common fisheries policy and also to see how we can improve it. The common fisheries policy is a science-based policy. We keep on saying it to others, including to ourselves, and it is as true as it can be. Over the past decades, it has helped us rebuild fish stocks, improve sustainability, and balance ecological, economic, and social needs. Thanks to a strong and independent scientific advice, we have made substantial progress towards ensuring sustainable exploration and exploitation of marine living resources. And furthermore, we have to promote the science-based approach at the international level. Yet, as we look ahead, it is clear that the current setup to provide science and advice is challenged. Climate change is altering the ecosystems, species distributions are rapidly shifting, and human activities continue to put pressure on marine resources. This means that we are asking science to provide answers to ever more complex questions. If we want the common fisheries policy to remain effective, we must ensure that our scientific methodologies, governance, and stakeholder engagement remain fit for purpose. There are several pressing questions that we must address. How can we ensure greater stakeholder engagement in the scientific process? Which emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence and big data, can best support fisheries science? How can we better integrate climate change impacts into fisheries management? How do we move from principles to practice in making ecosystem-based approach fully operational? Each of these questions represents a major challenge, but also an opportunity. I'd like to go through them briefly. One of the most critical objectives is ensuring the science remains accessible, trusted, and actionable for all stakeholders. Science must not only be robust and independent, but also understood and accepted by the very people it affects, fishers, industry, and coastal communities. To increase stakeholder buy-in, we need, first, improve the way we communicate scientific findings. Scientists must be more proactive in communicating with managers and stakeholders about how they deliver advice. In particular, improvements in data or methodology, potentially leading to significant changes in the advice, should be fully explained. As for any process, errors can happen, but they should be more readily acknowledged and communicated. Involve fishers and industry early in the scientific process. Again, it was in a way stunning to see that I think there was no fisher here in the audience, probably because they are fishing in as much as they can be, but there are fisheries managers, so you would understand really a lot of what I'm going to say. But too often, stakeholders, especially the fishers, feel that the science is done to them, at best for them, rather than with them. And if we want to improve trust, co-creation of knowledge is essential. The early involvement of fishermen is also necessary to avoid some of the possible errors that I've just mentioned. Third, strengthen regional and local scientific capacities. Science is often centralized, but many fisheries challenges are local. We need stronger collaborations between European, national, and regional research institutions, ensuring that local expertise is fully integrated into policy decisions. By addressing these gaps, we can ensure that science is not just a tool for decision makers, but a shared resource for all. Another key challenge is how to integrate emerging technologies into fisheries science. We are witnessing very fast changes. Artificial intelligence and big data. AI can help analyze massive data sets, predict stock fluctuations, and improve decision-making in real time. Satellite and remote sensing technologies allow us to monitor fisheries activities more accurately and improve compliance with management measures. Electronic monitoring and onboard data collection. These can contribute to collecting more data and more precise data, and thus reduce the uncertainty in scientific advice. But while the potential is immense, we must also ensure that these technologies are integrated effectively, ethically, and inclusively. Not all stakeholders have the same access to technology, and we must work to reduce disparities in scientific capacity between regions and fleets. Perhaps the toughest of all the challenges, the long-term challenge, is climate change and its impact on fisheries. Rising ocean temperatures, shifting fish distributions, increasing ocean acidification and alkalinity are already affecting stock productivity and altering ecosystem dynamics. We must adapt our fisheries management to be more climate resilient, and that includes at least two things. One is strengthening climate-informed stock assessments. That means incorporating climate projections into fishery models that will improve their reliability. And for this, we need to identify how to reconcile the time scale of climate processes, usually in the order of decades, really long term, with the current annual decision on fishing opportunities. Second is enhancing interdisciplinary research. Fishery science cannot operate in isolation. We need stronger collaboration between oceanographers, climatologists, economists, ecologists, and probably other categories of scientists. Then the ecosystem approach to fisheries management. This has been a principle of the common fisheries policy for years, but turning it into practice remains tough. Sustainable fisheries management cannot focus on target species alone. We must consider the broader marine environment, including habitats, biodiversity, and the interaction between various species. And to make this reality, we must do three things. One is shift away from business as usual and further extend the focus from conventional single-species fisheries management towards a more holistic perspective. This requires improving the knowledge base by linking available information, requesting scientific advice that uses inter- and transdisciplinary approaches. Two, invest in integrated data and information to support ecosystem approach in collaboration with European Union member states and the relevant stakeholders, ICES, STCF, industry, and increase resources and capacity. Yes, we are short of that, and we know that we have to grow in that capacity. And third, again, back to stakeholders, involve them along the stages of the ecosystem approach implementation. Some stakeholders do not see their stake in this approach. It is necessary to engage them, train professionals, and better communicate about what has already been achieved and the benefits that can be gained. Today's seminar is an opportunity for all of us to engage in this dialogue. Your expertise and perspectives are very valuable in shaping the future of scientific advice within common fisheries policy. And discussions we have today will directly contribute to our reflections on the future of the fisheries science and policy. As we move toward a development and hopefully soon the release of the Ocean Pact, we must ensure that science remains at the very heart of our decision making. Our goal is very clear here: to build a fisheries management system that is not only sustainable, but also adaptive, inclusive, forward-looking, and for this, to provide the conditions for the provision of the use and the best available scientific advice. So I would like to thank you for all your commitment to this important dialogue. I encourage you to be bold, clear, sharp in your ideas, ambitious in your recommendations. We know that we have to do the reality check, but first we need to explore all possible avenues. And together, through science and cooperation, we can secure the future of our oceans and the communities that depend on them. With that, I wish you a productive and inspiring discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opening statement, and I saw that our panelists are already writing down some things to tune into when we have the discussion later on. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you the next speaker, our keynote speaker of this session, and she will provide an overview of the current advisory landscape for fisheries management, including the role of the STECF, the ICES, and other sources. Her presentation will highlight key challenges, limited resources, process rigidity, talent retention, and the impact of large-scale research programs like Horizon. And she will also discuss how climate change, ecosystem dynamics, and governance shifts add complexity to scientific advice. With that, I hand the floor to the person who is giving the keynote presentation, Science and the CFP, a Scientific Advice Affair. Please welcome Head of the Data Collection and Scientific Advice Unit at DG MARE, Raluca Ivanescu.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, I wanted to thank you for joining us this lovely afternoon. I mean, it's tough competition. We have the sunshine outside and the oceans inside. We hope we will be able to manage this competition. Secondly, I just wanted to invite you to a trip to our roots. I mean, you've been hearing all this week very interesting ideas about innovation and looking into the future, and how we can better collaborate to protect together the oceans by bringing a more integrated approach into our policies. But we believe it's very important to look a bit back where we started from in the protection of the oceans. And this is going back to the backbone, as Kestutis was saying, of our policies, which is the Common Fisheries Policy, and the very luxury situation that we have with the Common Fisheries Policy, which is the fact that we operate based on science. So science is at the core of everything that we do in terms of protecting our waters, making sure that we have enough resources for the future, and making sure also that we move into a more modern world in which we integrate more and more our management approaches. Also, I wanted to make a bit of a link that was already alluded to by Kestutis with the Ocean Pact. Why the last presentation is basically about fisheries when we are discussing overall about an Ocean Pact, and especially about science in fisheries. The Ocean Pact will prominently feature a chapter about marine knowledge and innovation. And we want to make sure that we create the proper bridge between the knowledge, the science, and the policies. And we transform the innovative knowledge that we will have at our disposal into equally innovative science for better policies, for more integrated policies, more adapted, and hopefully easily acceptable by all stakeholders outside our world. So with this very short introduction, I will get into the actual presentation. We wanted to give an overview before our panel will have the opportunity to exchange more on where we are starting from in terms of delivering science. No? Okay. So we will look together at what is scientific advice in the traditional understanding, let's say, of the concept, who provides the scientific advice, how the advice is produced, and what happens after we have it. Sorry, we'll just go one forward. So as I was saying, one of the key principles of the Common Fisheries Policy is that we function based on scientific advice. It's part of the CFP regulation, and it's basically the full concept of taking management decision based on best available scientific advice. So we work hard together with our stakeholders, with our scientific bodies, to ensure that we have this best available scientific advice readily available on time for policies that move very fast in the fisheries world. This advice is delivered by recognized and keyword, independent scientific advisory bodies, scientific committees, and research consortia. We will have a bit of a closer look as to who are these advice provider bodies, and we will start with ICES, the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. We will then get to the Scientific, Technical, and Economic Committee for Fisheries, a very fast look at the Regional Fisheries Management Organization scientific processes, and the very last, but not unimportant, scientific consortia. The first one is ICES, which is an external scientific body, very important to our policies. They provide advice for all stocks that we are managing in DG MARE in the Northeast Atlantic and the Baltic. It is a crucial advisory body because we have a very long-standing collaboration. We work based on an annual grant agreement in which we outline the main principles of our collaboration, but also a number of recurrent advice requests that we know stem from our legislation and are absolutely key to our policies. In addition to that, we have a range of other topics that may show up every year, unexpectedly sometimes a bit more predictable, from various international negotiations, for example, where we have to agree together with our external counterparts on a shared understanding of a scientific aspect. And then, together with our partners, we go back to ICES and we ask that question. Sometimes ourselves may identify a specific aspect that it has not been foreseeable at the very beginning of the year, but is very important for the management of a specific issue. And we ask this kind of non-recurrent advice request to ICES. The reason I'm explaining this difference is because let's say the speed, the agility of these scientific operations is absolutely crucial. We depend a lot on the capacity of ICES to respond to our recurrent advice requests, but these are foreseeable, easier to plan in terms of bringing the relevant scientists together, whereas the non-recurrent advice requests are much more difficult to deal with process-wise and sometimes on content as well, because we don't know. So identifying key experts quickly is very, very important in order to make sure that we have the right responses at the right time, with the speed that we need. We ask advice on a number of issues from ICES, mainly conservation, protection, and sustainable use of the marine environment, fisheries and marine data, and marine science and research. So our relationship with ICES, let's say, focuses mainly on conservation aspects in a nutshell. We will now get to STCF, which is also a key advisory body of the Commission, but with a bit of a different setup. They are an expert group of the Commission, and they are a great help in preparing a range of very, sometimes maybe not very visible legislation, but absolutely key in the implementation of the common fisheries policy. We are talking about a body of more or less 35 scientists who work at sometimes at a very fast speed with impossible deadlines. They are not hired by the European Commission. They are part of the national institutes and sometimes independent experts selected based on their expertise and absolutely independent from this particular perspective, which is a great asset in terms of ensuring independence of the advice, but we will see that a bit later, can create challenges in terms of availability of the advice. It is very important also to understand that in addition to conservation aspects and management of living marine resources, STCF also focuses on providing us with economical, social and technical considerations. So sometimes it has a bit of an extra twist or an additional angle, let's say, as compared to the type of advice that we receive from ICES. And our requests include these type of questions. We need to know the overall economic picture of our fleets. We need to know the social perspective, let's say, in terms of our policies, to know where we are heading as a community, in order to make sure that we understand the overall impact, not only conservation-wise, of our policies. You will see here some numbers just to understand the amount of work that this not very big body is providing. We are talking about 20 working groups per year. They are always agreed early January. Then the results coming out from the assessments and analysis coming out from these working groups are endorsed by 3 plenaries taking place in spring, summer, and winter, which review the working group's activities and assess, when needed, the same story as with ICES, ad hoc requests. These are requests that are unforeseeable at the beginning of the year, but very important for sound management and policies. So sometimes we have to go back to STCF and ask them, with urgency usually, and a lot of pressure on our scientists, to provide us advice on some unforeseen aspects. This is the third category of scientific bodies where we are involved in a different form. These are external, so they are part of our international engagement. Every regional fisheries management organization has a dedicated scientific body, with the exception of NEAF, who works with ICES. And we participate not only with Commission internal experts, but also with national scientists in the work of these scientific bodies, with a view to, first of all, make sure that we provide our understanding of the scientific aspects into the RFMO's policies, but it's also a very good exchange of views on the overall functioning of innovation, knowledge in other places of the world. And another category, let's say, is the bilateral agreements, the so-called SFPAs, where there are also scientific committees. Many of our colleagues are involved in that type of work that serves, again, not only to, let's say, have a common ground, common understanding of the scientific aspects, but also to exchange views on how science is evolving, and it's even about capacity building in some situations. This is a very intense work. Many of our colleagues are traveling a lot and working very long hours to make sure that our international engagement is also based on sound scientific basis. So not only the EU side of the policies, but also our external engagement is very much attached to the principle of the best available scientific advice. And what do we do when we cannot ask advice from, or there are specific aspects where we cannot get advice from any of the scientific advisory bodies? We have a bit of an option that is basically very valuable, not very easy to administer, to manage, because it's very heavy in terms of administrative engagement. We use framework contracts to get scientific advice and scientific support in various regions to ensure that we have enough scientific capacity to support all this work that you have been seeing before. We don't have enough people in DG MARE with scientific expertise to get involved in the various international settings and negotiations, and this is the mechanism that allows us to remain involved and we count very much in this particular mechanism on the support from the national scientific institutes. So this is a whole network bringing together national scientific institutes and Commission colleagues in ICES together with other advice requesters such as Norway, Iceland, the UK, so on and so forth, in STCF, but also in international settings such as the RFMOs or the SFPAs. So this is the framework. Now, very quickly, what is the process? How do we get from data to the final product, and what do we do with that product? We have, for collecting data, let's say, very important tool, which is the data collection framework, and it is basically one of the most ambitious data collection frameworks and, let's say, programs in the whole world. The way it goes in practice is that our scientific advisory bodies issue data calls based on the identified policy needs, and that data goes into the various working groups and workshops to be processed. The conclusions are then reviewed by the scientific bodies' decision-making process bodies, which is in the case of ICES is ACOM, in the case of STCF is the plenary. And after this endorsement, a peer review mechanism, the advice is released. For the researchers, let's say the studies that we are managing within our, let's say, our DG, together with specific consortia selected for specific topics, the process is more or less similar. We get at the end to a report through a peer review process. The key idea being that we want to make sure the science we have is independent and credible. So the peer review concept is absolutely crucial in all three situations. Well, as we are looking ahead, and this is going to be probably much more interesting based on the panel discussions that will take place afterwards, we have to see what kind of advice we need for the future. And here, Kestutis has already alluded to some of these aspects. We need advice that comes maybe faster, with more frequency, looking at other aspects than just stock assessments as we are used to so far, and that integrates key challenges that we all learn, we are in the process of learning how to deal with, such as the climate change and what kind of impact climate change has on stock distribution, on population dynamics, impact of invasive species, so on and so forth. Gradually, and this is an important word, but equally important, we are advancing more and more towards or in the implementation of the ecosystem approach to fisheries management. And there have been some cases in the very recent past, such as the regulation on the protection of vulnerable marine ecosystems. It's this concept of trade-offs between economic activities and conservation. And this is, in a way, the very key concept of the ecosystem approach. It's an integrated take on a number of conflicting, sometimes, objectives that stem from social, cultural, but also environmental and economic concerns, to bring them all together in a policy that makes sense. We will go more and more into this in the implementation of this concept, which is already mentioned as a key principle by the current Common Fisheries Policy. And this is a very fast overview of what is our understanding of the ecosystem approach to fisheries management, because the reality is that this is a concept that may be understood in very different ways if you ask various stakeholders. So our view is that this is a holistic, this is the key word, holistic fisheries governance framework that requires, as I was explaining, trade-offs between ecological, social, including sometimes cultural and institutional aspects, and economic sustainability criteria. Not very easy maybe, but absolutely crucial in going ahead to making sure that we have well-balanced policies for our waters. So, this is where we are now. We have some advantages with the current system. We have a system that is based on peer-reviewed, that delivers peer-reviewed science. We have a system with a proven record, efficiency, and general credibility in the sense that the scientific advisory bodies deliver scientific advice that is recognized by everyone involved in fisheries management. So that in itself ensures stability in the system. And it is also inclusive because, as you've seen, all these advisory bodies work with scientists who come from all relevant stakeholders, from all advice requesters, so to say. So that in itself ensures stability in the system and credibility. Not all is rosy, unfortunately, I mean, as usual in life. So we will have a very quick look at the challenges that we perceive. There may be more, and I'm sure if we ask people who are closely involved in fisheries management, you will identify other challenges. But for us, some of the challenges that we are confronted with more and more these days are the fact that we have limited human and financial resources. Financial, I think, this is something that every single public administration faces these days. We have less resources for more work. And human, in the sense that we have already a limited pool of fisheries scientists who may or may not have the expertise that is needed for the upcoming challenges. And we also have to make sure that we interest a new generation of fisheries scientists and wider ecological consideration scientists to be there for the future. So this will require, for sure, additional efforts from our side, but I hope from the wider community to engage with universities and the academic world in general, to engage with national administrations, national scientific institutes, to make sure that we have the new pool of scientists ready to help shape the world of the future in terms of protecting the ocean. Then the next challenge is a bit more down to earth or to water, whatever you want to call it. We have a very repetitive process. So normally, fisheries policies and fisheries management aspects are annual. And we know exactly the cycle. With very few exceptions, it's the same cycle, which is good. The bad thing is that it's a very fast cycle. So, and we are basically forced to integrate more and more considerations every single time into that very fast cycle already. So we are now facing a bit of a crunch time in terms of delivery. How much can you do with the limited resources that we have at our disposal? And I'm talking here about the Commission, I'm talking here about ICES, I'm talking here about STCF and any other scientific advisory body. We are all facing similar challenges, I think, from this point of view. Then there is also another aspect which is a bit counterintuitive. We have been very much engaging with the scientific community through various funding programs, such as Horizon, but not only, to allow research, innovative research and studies into various topics that are relevant for our topics. And this is great. This is how we mobilize academia. This is how we keep scientists involved close to us and close to our realities. However, the downside of this story is that the very same scientists who have to participate to ICES and to STCF and, in general to the day-to-day work in fisheries science are the same ones who work on these projects many times. So there is a bit of a, I wouldn't call it conflict, but it's just extra pressure in the system that comes with very good intentions and very useful intentions. So this is something that leads even more for enlarging the pool of scientists. We also have, I mean, this is related to let's say, the resources story. We have difficulty sometimes securing all the advice we need, because when you have few, I mean, not too many people and many priorities, and more a very moving, fast-moving political world, geopolitical world, prioritization becomes a bit complex. And also, we have, I wouldn't call it necessarily a challenge, but something to address into the future, and we have actually started doing this, making sure that we don't forget to bring the stakeholders with us, to keep them and to bring them with us. And by stakeholders, I refer to the outside world, meaning NGOs, meaning the industry, but also to our institutional stakeholders, meaning the European Parliament, the Council. We need to make sure that they understand where the science is coming from, how the science is shaped, the principles. So we need transparency, we need engagement during the scientific process with these stakeholders, and sometimes it's just making sure that we explain, communication. This year we have already increased the number of meetings with stakeholders. I'm talking about the external stakeholders for now, and we will continue these efforts. We think they are very, very important for the acceptance and the transparency of the process. This is basically the other side of the coin, which is how we support our colleagues who are negotiating in various settings, because we need scientists not only for good advice, but we also need scientists for supporting sound negotiations, making sure that whatever comes out of whatever policies are coming out of the various negotiations is a product that makes sense and that translates properly the science into policies. And this is where we are facing a bit of tension in terms of resources again. I mean, that is unfortunately the reality, as negotiations in a post-Brexit world became more and more intense and frequent. So, there is an increase in frequency. And this is also placing a strain to a certain extent to what advisory bodies can do, because with increased negotiation space, there is always an increase in the requests that go to the scientific bodies. So there is a bit of a tension there. And we are also getting into a world where, as the questions become more complex, the boundaries between science and management are constantly tested. In the end, what constitutes science and what is management in an ecosystem approach. So this is the type of considerations that we will have to address more and more into the future. I think, all in all, I have already explained some of these things, so I'm aware of the time. I don't want to insist too much, and I want to give time if people want to ask questions, clarifications. I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much. We will just check if there are any questions, ladies and gentlemen. If there are questions here in the venue, you can raise your hand. I will jump off the stage and come to you with the microphone. Maybe that's a bit more handy and sympathetic. For the people following the live stream, you can send in the questions via Slido. So maybe we can show the Slido QR code if people want to send in a question for Ms. Ivanescu, then we have the possibility to do so. So we're making the switch right now as we speak. In the meantime, is there anyone here who has a question? Oh, there, yeah, okay. Look at me jump. I have to now be very, very careful with this microphone here, that it doesn't start whistling. First of all, sir, state your name and your function, and then ask your question, please.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's one of the handheld microphones. I think it's the left one. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really informative. I'm Angel Muñiz from the European Marine Board Secretariat, and I have actually a question with one of your from one of your challenges that you said that the outcomes of these large consortia that outside MFAF, so Horizon Europe and other projects, how would you recommend that these inputs of these new discoveries and so on are informed your process? Would you recommend to go to the scientific advisories like ICES, the regional fisheries management organizations, or is directly with the European Commission, the MARE, or the national systems? How do you recommend that we overcome this kind of like, missing link, let's say? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this question. It's actually a very valid point in the context of the preparations of the Ocean Pact, because indeed, this is what we see as well, that there is a bit of a missing link there. We have a very interesting body of research that exists there, financed by the Commission, and then we have the scientific advisory bodies, but we don't have an established mechanism of feeding consistently that research into the work of scientific advisory bodies. In the best case scenario, we have people who work in the national institutes and then participate to ICES, and they bring ICES or STEC. They bring that knowledge into the scientific advisory bodies out of their own initiative, which is great. But that is not a process. So we need to think about a process that allows us to integrate the knowledge into the science. And this is something that we will look into in the preparations of the Ocean Pact as well.
Which one?
Thank you.
Okay, in the meantime, we have another question. I was just instructed that we have to use a different microphone. So
Okay.
I will switch microphones as fast as a Formula One pit stop. There you go. Boom. You haven't seen a thing.
Depends who is pit stop, I don't know.
We have a question here. First, state your name, sir, and
Yes.
where you are from, and then you can ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Charles Barkov from the Baltic Sea Center at Stockholm University. I wonder what can be done to reduce the risk that what is in essence a growth forecast is misinterpreted by managers as a catch recommendation. I'm talking specifically about certain ICES advice for stocks that are covered by management plans that are approved by all the countries fishing.
Thank you.
I think this is a question, I mean, it's a bit of a complex question, let's say, because it goes back also to our framework, our legal framework. And our legal framework works based on very specific concepts about what constitutes advice implementable in the TAC and quota system. I think we will have opportunities to exchange a bit more on that kind of considerations with our colleagues who are part of the panel, hopefully. But we also have to understand that, you know, the legislation that exists already enshrines certain interpretations of what should be let's say, the basis for the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions here from the venue? Anyone else? Maybe some questions via Slido. I don't know if we got any questions from the people who are following the live stream. I'm just checking if they send in some questions. Not for the moment. So, talk about timing, ladies and gentlemen. It is 3 sharp, absolutely amazing. I would like to thank you very much for this very interesting explanation on what is going on and what the future might be. Give a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Raluca Ivanescu. 3 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. I think it is the right moment to have a little coffee or a little tea or maybe some biscuits, some cookies. Now is the time to get them. We see each other again here in the room at 3:20, and then we start with our scientists in the panel for a very, very interesting conversation. See you in 20 minutes. I don't know, some crowd surfing or something like that. I don't know. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we could all please move a bit to the front. Don't stay in the back rows. Also, if you're in the front, it's more difficult to escape. So please come to the front. Then we can make it nice and cozy here. If you feel like doing it. It's not an obligation, but it would be nice. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for your punctuality. It's absolutely amazing to get the crowd out and back in on time in 20 minutes to have a coffee break. By the way, how was the coffee break? Was it good? Also, people at home or still in the office, I hope that you enjoyed a nice coffee break. So we're starting again. That's why I'm already making a little bit of noise so that you realize that, oh, you have to come back to your screens. So, it's 3:23. I think it's high time to start with the last part of this session and also the last part of the European Ocean Days. Our panel, Scientific Advice, what role for the future of the CFP or the Common Fisheries Policy? We're going to have a lot of abbreviations, I think, in this session, but our scientists will help me through them. If you want to ask questions, ladies and gentlemen, you have the opportunity throughout the entire panel. The panel will be finished at approximately 4:20. So you will have almost 1 hour to ask any question you want. We have 5 questions that we have prepared for the scientists, 5 or 6-ish. That might not be enough to fill 1 hour, so we need your input, we need your questions. Also, the people following the live stream, you know the drill. Go to Slido or scan the QR code and send in your question, and then we will, of course, make sure that we handle it. If your question is not answered during the session, we will keep the question for us and we will send you an answer. We will check in with the scientists or we'll check in with some of the specialists here to provide you with the correct answer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have 6 esteemed people here in the panel. First, I'm going to mention their names. They will come on stage under a huge round of applause. I'm counting on you. We have Ciaran Kelly, David Reid, Clara Ulrich, Raul Garcia Rodriguez, Claus Sparrevohn, and Norman Graham. Keep going, keep going, keep going. There we go. You can sit down wherever you want. We have 6 seats for you. I will remain on my feet, so you will go. Yeah. Later on during the panel, we will take away 1 seat, and then we will start the music. Let me introduce all the panel members, ladies and gentlemen. First, we have Ciaran Kelly, Dr. Ciaran Kelly. Yes, you can raise your hand. That's me. Director of Fisheries and Ecosystems Advisory Services at the Marine Institute in Ireland. That is still correct? Correct. Thank you very much. Then we have Professor David Reid. There you go. Or you go by Dave. Dave, yeah. Professor Reid has worked for 35 years in fisheries management. He joined ICES in May 2024 as chair of the Science Committee, and he was involved in no less than 34 EU-funded projects. He knows what he's talking about. Then we have Dr. Clara Ulrich. Finally, a lady. That's good. That's good. Fisheries scientist and coordinator of scientific advice in support of fisheries Public Policies at IFREMER. It's the French National Institute for Ocean Science and Technology. Still correct? Ah, that's nice. Then we have Raul Garcia Rodriguez. What a beautiful name.
4 million people with that surname.
Really? Okay. I know, but I just like it. I just like it. And I'm going to say it again, Raul Garcia Rodriguez. It's absolutely amazing. You studied marine science at the University of Vigo. Since 2002, you work at the WWF in Spain as senior fisheries officer coordinating its fisheries program. There you go. And then we have Dr. Claus Sparrevohn. There you go. Chief Science Officer for the pelagic fishing sector in Denmark for more than 10 years, focusing on strengthening the collaboration between the fishing sector and the scientific bodies. And last but not least, we have Dr. Norman Graham. There you go. I'm casting a shadow, Dr. Graham. That's not good. That's not good. 40 years of experience in fisheries. First as a commercial fisherman. That's absolutely amazing. Then a career in fishing gear technology at the Marine Laboratory in Aberdeen. And you were chair of the ICES working group on fishing technology and behavior. That's correct? Absolutely amazing. Like I said, we have some difficult questions that we have prepared for you. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to ask questions, I already said it, send them in via Slido. And just to give you a heads up, dear panel members, you are all here today because of your respective roles in the implementation of the CFP, the Common Fisheries Policy, either as science providers or as representative of the stakeholders, whose livelihood very much depend on the quality and relevance of the science supporting the decision-making process. In the context of a fast-changing environment, the Commission is currently assessing how the scientific setup and process are fit to address tomorrow's key challenges and to what extent they must evolve to continue to be suitable to support the CFP. You all have important stakes in this, and the main objective of today's exchange is to hear your views and to see how this can feed into the Commission's reflection on the scientific process. Still up for it? Yes? Yeah. Dave is very, very relaxed. He's like, let's get this show on the road. First question is about the main challenges. Main challenges, you have heard the presentation by the Commission already identifying some of the main existing challenges for the delivery of science. Do you, as members of this panel, do you agree with this description, or do you have additional concerns about other critical challenges, either current or maybe some likely to occur in the coming years? Who would like to answer? Take it away. If no one takes the microphone, then I have a big issue. So, there you go. Ladies first.
Okay, thank you everyone for inviting us here. So I wanted to bring maybe 2 points in these difficulties, and one is about the human resources that was already mentioned already, and the second one is really about the topics we deal with. And then discussing the human resources, it's really a key point here for attracting. It takes 12, 15 years maybe to form a scientific expert. You know, it's already 5 years of study, 3 years of PhD, 3, 4 years of postdoc, and then after you also need a research environment to really open your mind and be confronted both to scientific issues and expertise issues, policy issues. So it's really something that we keep evolving with time. So that means that the scientific institute, they really face this challenge of continuity. You know, we need to have young scientists in long time before they already can do this, what we want for policy support. And also we need this continuity of funding. You know, there's a lot of money, but it's not always targeted in the right place. Policy science, fishery science, it's a very slow stop, I would say, that requires a lot of routine work, routine data collection, routine expertise, and it doesn't always fit with these project-based fundings where we need to sell new ideas, innovations, and not really follow up. So I think really this putting the money into this long-term planning, that's really key. It needs to be stable, and it needs to be sometimes not so sexy, but very useful. So I think that's really for me key point for the people. And in terms of the topics we deal with, I think Certainly, they are scientifically more and more challenging. It was said a lot, climate change and all these things. But I think also for policy, they are more difficult because until now, it was rather easy world. We have fisheries, and then we say if we fish less, we will have better fish stocks. So you have quite an easy link between the advice, the policy, and then the fisheries, and we understand each other. But now we have all these new topics coming in: climate change, pollution, habitat destruction, the loss of juvenile fish, and all these things, predation by seals, a lot of this story. And first, the scientific issue is difficult, the advice is difficult, but also what the policy can do about this, because what can fisheries policy do about seals, about pollution, about habitat destructions? This is way more than just restricting the fisheries. Yeah. So it's not only us that have difficulties with more complex issue, but it's the entire interlinked science, advice, policy that is challenged.
Yeah, I see here, can I call you by your first name? Okay, Norman, I see you vigorously shaking your head, so that means that you totally agree. Or do you have like another view on these things? It's on.
It's on.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think in terms of the human resources, I mean, Clara explains it very well. I mean, it is challenging. I mean, fundamentally, when we look at the core of the CFP, the origin of the CFP, it was very much about management of fish stocks. So the science was all built up around that, and many of us on this panel, that's our kind of historic background. But as Clara alludes to, I mean, there's a lot of new dimensions that have come in. The climate change is obviously one of the big drivers. Offshore renewables, the whole space, the use of marine space is becoming much more challenging. And it does require, it needs to be constantly fed with new scientists, with new thinking, but making that attractive is actually quite a challenge, I think. So, you know, so we've gone beyond just simply turning the handle and saying, well, next year this is, you know, we can fish so many thousand tons of cod. We are now going much beyond that. What is the ecosystem effects of fishing, for example, on the environment? When I started in this business way back, you know, almost 4 decades ago, it was relatively straightforward. It was just simply about how much fish can we catch. The offshore renewable issue was not there. The only interaction was really between the petrochemical industries and fishing. So the world has changed very dramatically in that period, and the consequence of that is that we also need to have much more detailed science, detailed advice to deal with these, and quite often these are conflicting challenges. So not just the kind of traditional biologists, we need a lot of more kind of sociologists involved in the process. It's quite a complex system that we deal with.
The thing is that what I'm wondering is, I'm already from an older generation, of course. I think some of us in the panel can also check into that generation. How, if we talk about making this sector attractive and sexy, how do you see that? How can we do that? Ciaran, do you have any ideas?
Okay, now I'm on the spot for an idea and I didn't want to be there. But I'll reflect on something. So what Clara is talking about and what Norman has picked up on, and it was referred to in Raluca's presentation as well, was this kind of framing, and I want to talk about the framing of this here, as if there is a seamless process that goes from policy through implementation to science, okay? And part of what we're discussing now, which is the difficulties inside in the system, in my view, are a little bit to do with the difficulty in that framing that we have at the moment. So there's an impression created here from Raluca's presentation that you have a policy, you have an implementation, and then science feeds into that. So in other areas, and we're talking about safety and risk here in the environmental aspects of it. So in other areas like engineering, for example, this is fairly clearly established because engineers can measure things to a degree of tolerance, and you can come up with safety thresholds, and you can design an industry with safety thresholds around it on that basis. That's intuitive and people understand that, okay? Here's a statement, the first statement. Stock assessment is not engineering, okay? And the kind of figures that you get out of stock assessment, even though they can give you something to the 3rd or 4th decimal place, the interpretation of that number is entirely different in the context of what we're talking about in terms of how the science feeds into that process and thus the policy, and what you have, for example, in safety engineering for air travel. And that needs to be framed properly, because what we've got now is a little bit of tension, because science actually works in an explorative way and policy is implemented in a normative way. And there is a tension between the desire of science here to be explorative and to run fast and break things, okay, and the needs for a policy, which is for a framework for the management of something. So my view here would be that if we want to address some of those issues, like, for example, tension in the system, like, for example, recruitment of scientists to it, we need to look into that framing and figure out how to make that work.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Still no answer on making it sexy again, but then again, that's for later. Dave, chip in, please. I'm going to move there. I was instructed by the technical people not to do that too much, but I'm still going to do it.
Is this working?
So that I'm closer to you.
So it's always great not going first, because these guys all said really cool things. I think the way to make it sexy, my daughter thinks it's sexy because we're addressing key issues that society cares about. The health of the ocean. If you go and ask them, that's really important. So we've got to find a way of doing that. The problem with the advice we do right now is it's very little to do with the health of the ocean. It's slightly, well, maybe more than slightly, to do with the health of some of the fish stocks. And so it's the problem, the challenge we're facing. When I saw this question on the paper, I thought, geez, there's going to be 100 ways I could disagree with Raluca. But the one thing that I think is important is how to give that complex advice to the policymakers in a way that they can actually make use of it. So if I say you can have 10,000 tons of cod in the North Sea next year, everybody will go, yay, good, we'll go and get that. But you'll kill all the dolphins, but you'll destroy the carbon stores, but there'll be 25 fatal injuries among the fishermen. That's really difficult advice to take, because you're being asked implicitly to trade off one bad thing against another bad thing. So I think that's the challenge we face. It's not that we haven't got the science. Some of the science is pretty rough, but we have to learn to use rough science. It's how to get that into an operational system, how we affect change.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Raul, I'm coming to you because you are coordinating the fisheries program at the WWF in Spain. Well, do you agree with the description that was given by the Commission, or do you have other concerns when we talk about these challenges that we are facing?
Okay, thank you. Well, I agree with the points that were raised, but I would like to include other elements. No?
Feel free.
And as our colleagues are talking more on big fisheries, big stocks, where are under ICES mandate, etc. I would begin by the local. We have still, in many countries, large small-scale fisheries, exploiting hundreds of stocks, hundreds of species. We don't have stock assessment for them, for most of them. So we manage small-scale fisheries through proxies. We have good tools. We can. I mean, with certain level of information, you can do the things well. But as my colleagues were explaining, the ecosystem are changing in such fast speed that it really is very difficult to understand what is. I'm thinking now in the Strait of Gibraltar. Strait of Gibraltar, the black spot bream, one of the main fisheries, has collapsed. Overfishing for sure, but probably other. It's apparently full of bluefin tuna. There is an invasive alga, an invasive weed that is really destroying many habitats that were very, very, very productive. So that's a gap in because I mean, the common fisheries policy don't do any distinction among fisheries. We have to meet this MSY. We have to fit to meet the good environmental status. So what we do with these fisheries? I mean, there is a lot of science about these fisheries, but then. And I think this is common to other projects. Where is the data? I mean, we are funding hundreds of projects, hundreds. We have information about many things. We will have gaps, of course. But then when you go to certain analysis study, you don't see that information. You know, because you are part of the project, that it's there. It's not there. So for me, a big challenger is how we centralize the information or we make available the information. Then we have mentioned already, the sociology. We are talking at the end about socio-ecological systems. where basically ICES can put limits to the biomass extraction, to the restriction of the gear. But the system is more complex. It's the human there. And we know the stocks won't follow our advice. I mean, the ecosystem, they adapt to the physical conditions, etc. What we can try to influence and work with is with the humans around the fishery. And there is other type of science. There is social science, there are economical science, there are policy science that I think we need to engage stronger with more energy in the system. Why? Because at the end, we have common rules, and I totally agree, common goals for all the fisheries, but the local adaptation is key. I mean, the systems and the fisheries and the people are very different, even this port from this port. So how we advise the local adaptation of basically the implementation, how we advise the ecological transition on port. Yeah. This is part of our concern, and that's why we are working with so many institutions, scientific institutions and fishers, to feed, to inform this ecological transition, because this ecological transition is the one that may guarantee you that we won't go back to overfishing. I mean, when the people understand the limits and when the people see that it's profitable, sustainable fisheries, it's very difficult to go back. And we are very lucky, we have dozens of examples only in Spain that I think many other countries for sure, that can teach us a lot in this our policy and advice.
Yeah.
Okay. More element. One you mentioned maybe, I am very active in the scientific bodies of RFMEOs. No? That is terrible hard work. I mean, 2 weeks with models. I don't know if it happens in other countries, but in Spain, this don't contribute to your curriculum. I mean, contribute the publications, the paper, the report, everything. But this real science in real time that you are trying to estimate and stock in millions of square kilometers and all this real science in practice, in Spain is not contributing to your curriculum. So really people very committed to participate in the committees. But I see there is no young people entering. It's people like me or older than me, most of them. So regeneration is needed in the fishing sector, but it's needed in many other sectors around the fisheries team.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone wants to? Yeah, go ahead, Claus. Do you have a microphone? There you go.
I have a microphone here, yes. I actually want to pick up on the last thing you said there. And I was just wondering if the industry themselves also will have a responsibility in recruiting people to the scientific community and to do the stock assessment and the management and so on. And I think in our institution, we have had several PhD students, and I also have colleagues from other parts of the pelagic sector. So we are starting to build a strong scientific community. And I think the advantage of what we can offer young scientists is actually that you are getting a little away from this academia route where you need to publish, you need to apply for money and all that stuff. So I think it could be we should think about getting industry involved more into the recruitment of persons. Of course, we need to set up some systems to make sure that it's still unbiased and reliable science and all that, but I think we can do that. That has been done in other sectors.
Thank you.
Could I also just to mention, I just want to agree with this, especially that the climate change is going to be a big problem in the future. But I think the biggest issue here will probably be on our management side, because the way I see our management, we typically are very much looking backwards to how our ecosystem was. For example, we will have an ecosystem in the North Sea or the Baltic Sea, where we have some idea of what we think ideally it should look like. And if the climate are changing it to a completely different ecosystem, it's going to be very difficult to really understand how we're going to manage it. What is our ambition with the systems?
Yeah.
I think the management part of it is really going to be tricky.
Climate change is one of the topics that we will address during this panel, of course. But first of all, we have to go to the ecosystem approach. I don't know if there are any questions that came in through Slido. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, chip in, please. Scan the QR code. No questions for the moment, so then we move on. Whenever there's a question, just type it in and interrupt us. Ecosystem approach, are you ready? Yeah? Okay. a long introduction. So already, my apologies, but a long introduction. So since 2002, the CFP makes specific references to the importance implementing an ecosystem approach to manage fisheries, the EAFM. There are many different understandings of what this means. While some stakeholders often tend to focus more on the need to take into account interspecies relationships, MARE's view is that an EAFM represents a holistic fisheries governance framework that requires trade-offs between ecological, social, and economic sustainability criteria. EAFM is an extension of our current conventional fisheries management system that considers multiple stressors. For example, overfishing, climate change, there it is, pollution, the impact of fisheries conservation measures, and economic and social sustainability. And we see three broad challenges needing to be addressed. The fisheries impacts on the structure and functioning of marine ecosystems, the individual and cumulative effects on fisheries resources, and the social, economic, and governance aspects. Now, DG MARE considers that the first category of challenges is increasingly being addressed. For example, the VME's regulation, or the fact that 3/4 of ICES stocks evaluations include ecosystem considerations. But that further work is needed on the two other categories. Now, the first part of this question, is the advice available suitable for implementing an EAFM? And if not, which specific aspects should be more integrated into the scientific advice? Dave, go ahead. First of all, I would like to really say respect for the fact that you grasped this question, because for me this was high level. But go ahead.
So since 2002, I've been working on this. So I feel qualified to talk about it.
Absolutely, go ahead.
2002 is 23 years ago, and Raluca in her presentation quite correctly pointed out we're still struggling to do it. And I think I was looking at this question, I was sort of dreading, but really looking forward to. I think there's a lot of really nice bits in this. The holistic fisheries management is a really good way to go. Do we really need this very reductionist approach that we currently have? I think probably I'll answer the question and then I'll say why. No, I don't think that what we've got now is suitable for that, because we're still focused on that single species stock assessment. And as long as you do that and don't include, let's say very simply, the fact that that species feeds on and is fed on by other animals is explicitly incorporated into it. Climate change then changes the game again. Other things like pollution and plenty of other drivers will change that. So no, we're not in a position to do that right now. So in that point, I disagree with what's going on. What would I do about it? I would say we need to develop this line of advice that is not so, I think Ciaran said, not focused on the third decimal place of the accuracy, but is trying to develop a more risk-based approach to these things. So you get that number with its 3 decimal places, you say yes, but afterwards. And I think we need to have a way of doing that. And I don't think it's impossible, it just needs a less prescriptive view of advice.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone would like to also answer? Yeah, there you go. Clara?
But I think we've been working on this. I don't like hearing that fishery science is only about single stocks. I mean, I think this is what we were doing in the 80s, but I think in the 80s we discussed fish. In the 90s we start discussing fish and fishermen. Then after year 2000 we've been discussing fish, fishermen and the environment, and now we discuss fish, fishermen, the environment and the climate. You know, I think every decade we inflate the issue. So we keep learning, we keep discovering a lot of new things, but so, and I think, I mean, the knowledge we have today on the environment, there are still so many gaps, but there are still so many things we know, and the more we know, it's not nice. I think that's really the whole point, is that a trade-off hurts. Trade-off is always something that is painful for fishermen, because they are the one that really, a trade-off usually, the more trade-off usually means less fishing opportunities in the short term. So we have no issues with trade-off in the long term, because at the end, if you have plenty of fish in the sea, then in the long term, there is also plenty of fish for the fishermen. So there is no issue in the long term, but in the short term, this is where it's so painful, because every new trade-off in general, that means every new restriction for the fishing industry, with everything that means in the short term for the fishermen of today, that we know, I mean, they need to pay and they have their own livelihood. So, you know, that's why it is so painful. And that's also why it is so difficult to say what is the right level. In France now we discuss a lot about this trade-off between fishermen and dolphins, because we have all these dolphins in the Bay of Biscay. But then the more we understand why we have this interaction between the fishing and the fishing industry, the dolphins, doesn't mean that there is easy solutions. You know, really, I think the science is really not necessarily making a solution that will be easy for the fishermen to cope with. So in reality, this is making things more visible and then more painful in the short term. You know, so I think really for me, that is what I see the difficulty, because the science is really providing more and more answers. But an answer of science is not necessarily a solution that is easy to cope with. You know, so I think the criticism and then all the fact that we get unhappy system that is getting more conflictual, that is more tense, it's because the price to pay in the short term is getting more and more difficult, I think.
Yeah. Exactly. Go ahead, Ciaran, take the microphone. Yeah.
It's just a small point here, or it's a point, I guess. The question is about the ecosystem approach to fisheries management, and it was framed as whether the current implementation of the CFP, if this was compatible with MSY. And the simple answer to that, and I think it was given by Dave, is no, no, okay? And Clara has elaborated on the fact that there are trade-offs here. And most fisheries are managed in an international context, and it's outside the CFP, okay? So you've got the CFP on one side, you have the UK's fisheries management policy on the other side, you've got the Norwegians, you know, you'll have Icelanders and other people. So that's managed through negotiation, and negotiation is currently managed through the single currency of TACs. And that's, if anywhere, the trade-offs occur, but at least there's an alignment, for example, within MSY as to what an outcome could be like a TAC. That's a lot of acronyms.
I know.
I see you nodding, so I'm presuming that
No,
you've understood that
MSY, I
completely.
understand, is the maximum sustainable yield?
Yes.
That's
the
what I understand.
TACs are the total allowable catches. So the issue here is that if you want to talk about trade-offs, where do you resolve those trade-offs? Are those trade-offs to be resolved in the scientific domain, or are they to be resolved through negotiation?
Yeah.
And that's where you need to focus on the space to try and get an answer. So the simple answer is no, and the elaboration of that is you need to step into that space to try and figure out how you're going to do it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, Norman, go ahead.
Probably as one of the people who's sitting doing that negotiation, my day job, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally we operate in a system which is a single species system. You know, that is at the core of what we do. That is the core of the annual negotiations. It is very much a very large chunk of the work that ICES does through its advisory wing. Obviously with the kind of SciComm on the science side, you know, that helps, should help evolve the science behind. But fundamentally, we ask for a number every year. And we sit and we negotiate. Whether the ecosystem deliberations, there are ecosystem deliberations sometimes. And for those of you who have been following Sandhill, that's been quite a good example of what we've been doing in terms of wider ecosystem considerations about exploiting a particular species and what the wider implications of that are. So there is a lot of things which actually can be at a very high level in terms of, from a very high policy perspective, but it is there. So the elements are there, and we use ICES for asking for help to understand these trade-offs. But fundamentally, we're operating in a machine. Let's just call it a machine. And there's many moving parts to that machine. Where I sit is very much at the interface between what we get from advice and how we deal with that from a policy perspective. And that policy perspective also means there's also a consequence of a legal process or a legislative process. which comes from the politicians, which comes from the Parliament, which comes from the Council. So these are very important elements that we don't often think about in terms of this system. But I think having a good map of what all these moving parts are is actually quite important. And I think it's also important to, when you look at that map, what is the role of the individual? What is the role of science? What is the role of management? Because these boundaries can be quite murky. And I think that's something I think is quite challenging. And it's one thing having a kind of murky boundary when you're dealing with advice for a single species in the North Sea, for example. It's much more complicated when you've got multiple stressors, multiple users in that space, whether it's offshore renewables, whether it's societal choice to reduce impacts of particular fisheries or minimize or protect the seals. These are definite tensions, and that's basically where the policy and the negotiations and all that fit in. But I think it's quite useful just to kind of look at that, how that whole picture fits together and how the cogs fit together.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, we already have some questions here, and I'm just going to pick out one, and it's going back to the first topic where we said it's about HR and about young people getting interested. Would a European doctoral network in the science policy nexus be a good option for educating the next generation of scientists? A question from Harald Hasler-Schetal. Yeah, what is the, yes, that's a clear answer. Yes, absolutely, I think so. And I think we need to make the young people more enthusiastic about this science and about everything that surrounds it. There was a huge focus on the STEM. It's all about, come on, get people into the direction of STEM, but I think it's about much more. How can scientific advice better integrate emerging challenges such as climate change, ecosystem consideration, and competing marine activities? That's my next question. There you go. Let's immediately skip to that. We heard how this rapidly changing environment brings new uncertainties around the scientific advice, but also about the unknown. Like, for example, the unknown. What are the impacts of climate change on fish stocks or species distribution? Are the fish moving northwards? Will the stock be less productive? Will invasive species be more present? One of the youngsters in the first panel on Monday told me that in Malta there are invasive species that are taking over the entire fishing region there, so it's a huge impact. In your view, what should be the priority areas of scientific work on climate change? Who would like to be the first?
Maybe just a point on this network of young scientists.
Yes.
I mean, I can witness that, at least for my institute, EFARO, this is not about, we are not short of excellent young scientists. I mean, each time we have a position of scientist open, we have so many good candidates. So I think this is not here that the issue is. The issue is to have enough scientific jobs to offer them. So this is really, we have a very good young scientist, and then a few of them manage to get a PhD, even fewer of them manage to get a postdoc, and then they get 3-4 years of traveling the whole world with a 1-year contract here and 1-year contract there. So you already lose half of the women, because then suddenly you start having issues with the family. And so, or you know that you have the couples, they are spread. One is in America, the other is in England, whatever. And then after you have even less permanent positions, so it really creates, you need a lot of motivation to go to the end, and you to be very lucky as well, because there are plenty of other people that are looking for this. So I think really for me, the main issue is to secure institutes that are big enough to secure like an interesting environment, a real scientific power. I think, again, science is really a collective work, so we need to be working in big institutes where you have opportunities, when you have support, logistic, everything you want. So this is really here, keeping institutes that can maintain permanent position and offer something. To me, the key issue is there.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go back to the question, the priority areas of the scientific work on climate change. Any ideas, Raul? What would you see as a priority there? Where should we focus on first?
Okay. well, I think there is no deniers of climate change in the fishing sector. Maybe we have in other sectors, but likely is one of the economical sector that, as they are every day at sea, they see, they observe. The changes are amazing fast. I mean, the species going down in deeper water, the species that get benefit, like shrimps in the Med. We are double catches of white shrimp in the Alboran Sea, changing very, very quickly. But we have a strength that is 1,000 of people live, going to sea every day. We use a lot local ecological knowledge. I mean, you can standardize, you can harmonize, you can test the robustness of the model. And it's fascinating. I mean, we began working on ecological knowledge 20-something years ago. Then when the biologists and ecologists come and they check the observation of the fishes about the different biotopos, habitat, I mean, what I mean is we have people every day at sea that really can provide very good information. In fact, there are fishing poles so worried that they are looking ways to attract science, to attract talent. What they are doing, they are building laboratories in the fish port to facilitate students, professors to go to investigate. They are buying aquariums. They offer hostels, fisheries family hostels. You can stay there for a cheap price. We are creating together what we call bioclimate stations. What is that? Basically, is to put all the institutions together around an area to gather information, including climate information. If we have all the sensors, or there are gaps in areas where we need to have sensors about temperature, currents, because there are so much linked to the biological cycle of the species. There are fish in port trying to contribute to understand the impact of the climate and adaptation. This is the other key element, how we adapt to the new situation. For example, already the scientists are doing with the knowledge of physics, identify climate refuge. There are areas like Galicia, like the Gulf of Leon in Spain, that they maintain cooler. And apparently, some of the species, they go to this area. Maybe in the future, we need to take measures about these areas, this climate refuge. We have to understand how the fishings work along the year, because the decisions are changing very quickly. We have tools, we have the bioeconomical models, we have fish essentiality analysis, that you make a picture about how the fishing is going in a port and how you can modify and adapt. At the end, what is key to all this? It is the resilience of their own system. So we are working with a lot of fishers, protecting areas, closing areas, doing special management, because we need to help the ecosystem to be as resilient as. And this brings me to the future. MSY, it's not an ecosystem. It is a production and economical reference. Maybe in the common fisheries policy, the review, we need to adapt to the new situation, that is, we need to put limits in the ecosystem. There are some countries like Alaska, UK, already introducing some elements of for example, establishing a total catch of limits for all the species, including those managed by TAC, but also by fishing effort. There are, I think, ways to, step by step, this is a transition, to contribute to the resilience of the system, because basically it's the only we can do, is to contribute to a health ecosystem that is able to resist in a better way that if the system is collapsing. So we have the tools. 23 years ago, I went to a professor, Juan Freire, who asked, what is ecosystem? How we can implement? And he told me, Raul, so far we only have MPA. Well, 23 years later, we have much more understanding of the ecosystem, and I trust very much. And we have a lot of data. We have a lot of data. Maybe now with artificial intelligence, we're able to integrate integrate better the information and understand better so complex relationships.
Yeah. Go ahead, Clara. Just chipping in of these fishes migrating. This morning we had someone here from the port of Zeebrugge who told us that there is in north of the North Sea there's a lot more squid than 5 years ago, and this is also migrating towards the north. So that is what I have learned, and this is a species that doesn't belong there, and it's all due to climate change. Clara, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this issue of emerging new species, moving species, I think this is really one issue in itself that has a lot of political implications, because countries with new species, they don't have historical fishing rights. So I think a lot of this is more, I would say, is more political than scientific. But this is maybe what we could call the good news of climate change from a fishing perspective. But I think climate change, unfortunately, mainly has also a lot of bad news, which is less growth, less recruitment, less productivity, and so that means a future which is way less desirable and thrilling maybe than the one. And I think this is where we need to have the discussion. And I just wanted to react on your point on MSY, because I really concur with this. I think MSY has been there for 20 years as an objective. And now, with all this changing climate, I think this is really a discussion we need to have, is MSY still the proper reference for both fisheries and ecosystem approach? And I think this is really about, because since that's the objective we all refer to, at some point, we will need to reopen that discussion, whether this is this the correct objective, and do we have the tools that really allow us to achieve that one, because we are not there yet, and maybe go beyond. So I think this is one of the answer to this, is that do we need to change the target at some point in our discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else wants to chip in? Yeah, there you go, Ciaran. I got the message from the people from the audiovisual department that we have to keep the microphones close to our mouths.
Okay, I'll keep this one open then.
Yeah, you can start beatboxing if you want.
That's fine. The question was framed in the first instance to say, was the current approach to what we're doing, how does climate change fit into that? And I just wanted to point out something, and it's been raised by Raul. I think Dave mentioned it beforehand as well in the context of this, that what we've got is a system at the moment that's focused on single species. MSY is that basis as well. And it works on a spatial and temporal scale that's not really compatible with looking at the impacts of climate. That's the first thing, okay? The second thing is that there's this simple narrative that seems to be sitting out there that, climate change equals warming. Warming equals fish move north, okay? Don't think it happens like that, okay? It's much more nuanced and complex than that, and I think you need to look at this at the basin scale, and what I mean by that is the sea basin scale. So Dave and his colleagues have done this, for example, in the Irish Sea. And what you can see is, with the best information that we have at the moment, you can sort of get an indication on the direction and maybe even some estimate of the scale of that change over a decadal point of view. So how does that work, as Dr. Phil would say on the TV, like how's that working out for you in your current policy, okay? Because we don't have a mechanism or a means to include that in the way in which we currently give advice. So the interactions that we're talking about here are multi-ordered, so they're not simply a first-order interaction. The sea heats up, so what? So the sea heats up, and then how that heat is dispersed in the ocean basin matters. And that matters because the biological organisms that are sitting in that ocean basin, that has an impact on them. That impact isn't just about the degree of temperature. It's about how that temperature is distributed, and it's also about the timing of when that temperature happens. Heat waves, for example, as stressors. So those then things affect the interaction between species. One species eats another in the food chain. And that then has a knock-on impact, which is not simply predictable in terms of the effect of the original input, which is heat, on the output productivity of the species that you're looking at. So we don't have a simple scalar button here of temperature and another scalar button of north-south that you can put into the current assessments and satisfactorily deal with climate change. It's not going to work like that. You're going to have to step back and look at a basin scale to do this.
Is this also connected to? I'm going to give you the microphone in a minute, Norman. Is this connected to what Nicholas said this morning? I don't know if you saw the panel where they were talking about the biological data, that they had a huge amount of biological data that they were still lacking. It was all about everything that is going on under the surface of the ocean, in the deep sea, and all the impact that it has on the ecosystems. So maybe also there, if we talk about data, this is something that is missing. Norman, you wanted to also give your opinion.
I just wanted to carry on with this conversation because I think it's very important that the dynamics and the complexity of what we're talking, and Ciaran really well described it, that it's not simple that you turn the heat up here and then there's an automatic and linear relationship or impact. And the other thing that we face is that we deal with models that are based on historic data. And we're making an assumption based on a few parameters that if we catch so many fish, then next year this is what's going to be there. So that is basically using, data from quite a different period, possibly in terms of temperature and various other things. And from a management point of view, we're already starting to get questions about what does that mean? What does it mean for even the single species management? I replied to a letter just last week about shouldn't we just lift the TAC restriction on this stock because we don't think the stock is going to survive in that particular sea basin anymore. And these are actually very challenging societal questions that are, is there a point, or do we have enough information to make that decision? That, the science is precise enough and accurate enough to say that in 5 years, that stock is no longer going to be there, so then we need to adjust our management. So there's a really close connection between this discussion, how precise we are and how accurate we are in terms of these forecasts. And considering what I said at the beginning, is that we're making forecasts based on history. But that is not necessarily going to be reflective of what we're looking for in the future. So we are dealing with very large levels of uncertainty, and that's the other thing that we need to try and deal with from a management perspective. Like, how certain are we that this is going to happen? And I suspect that the level of uncertainty is actually huge. So it's very difficult to make a policy decision, never mind going to the politicians and saying we need to change MSY. That's another challenge. I mean, where do you have these conversations is actually a very important part of the system. Because these decisions, the reason we have MSY as an objective in the Common Fisheries Policy is because ultimately that was a political choice by the people who make the legislation. So I think just as a little bit of a side, where we have these conversations is actually very important and how we interact around these conversations. But I think just in terms of, to go back to the specifics, the challenge from a management point of view is, what do you think is going to happen? And then we need to be able to figure out what that means for our future management decisions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, short, because
Very
we don't
quickly.
have a lot of time left.
Okay, just we mentioned already, but for so complex topics and thinking at local level and stakeholders, governance is key again.
Put the microphone close.
I want to put just two examples. It's Catalonia and Balearic. We have co-management committees where each stakeholder will have the same power. Scientists are there, managers are there, environmentalists and fishing sector. And all the sciences around these committees and the budget of European Maritime Fisheries Fund, it is much easier to develop projects, to develop stock assessment. It's an educational tool, it's an exchange of information tool. So governance is a key element of science as well, from the local to the global.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm going to jump to the last question because I see that the timing is very, very tight. Trust in the advice. Trust in the advice. One of the challenges mentioned by the Commission concerns the key issue of trust into scientific process and the resulting advice. What would be your suggestion as scientists to improve or even maintain trust in the advice? Claus, go ahead. Is it on? Now it's on.
There it is, sorry.
Now it's on.
Well, I think the best way to get trust in advice is to have an open advice system. I think that is really paramount. And talking for myself, I started out working for the industry around 11 years ago. I moved from an academia career at the Danish Technical University. And at that time, I was allowed to participate in a lot of ICES groups and really look into the details of the advice. And I think that has really provided a very good fundament for explaining to the fishermen that I work for how exactly the advice is being given. And so I really think that opening up is the way to do it. I think ICES has a very strong way of producing advice. It's very well based on best available science. So I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be willing to open it as they're already done. And I think they also started doing with the advisory councils to invite them to consultations on the grant agreement between ICES and the EU Commission. And I think it's really a good way to go.
Okay. Dave, you wanted to also give your advice?
My advice is exactly the same, actually. I think everything I've done that has been successful in the last 20 years has been done with fishermen alongside. In fact, wider, with NGOs and with civil society. So I think that's the key to it. And it's still very easy for us to step back and want to do our science in closed rooms because it's more difficult to do it with people in the room. But I'd go back to that Irish example that Ciaran talked about. I had fishermen sitting through 5 days of parameterizing a model with us. And that's not really their comfort zone. But they did it. They stuck with us. And by the end, they were able to not perhaps run the model, but ask really sensible questions of it and then predict the answers, which is basically scientific method. And it was wonderful, brought tears to my eyes. And I think we need more of that. We need people to go through the whole pain of our advice process with us. And that might help. Trust is difficult to win and easy to lose.
Absolutely. It's a work of years. Clara, go ahead.
Also, very quickly, but from the scientific point of view, for us, I find that very important that we keep structures like ICES or STCF or things that also protect us as individual scientists, but also force us to confront our ideas. I mean, everyone that has done this job knows that with the same data, the same model, you can produce widely different outcomes if you tweak some buttons in your models, So that means it is not a science we can do alone on our desk, back in our office, without ever confronting our results and the way we manipulate. I mean, it's like learning to drive. You need to learn to drive a model, So that's things we need to learn from other scientists. We need to be transparent. And then we need structure like ICES to impose some norms to make sure that we do the same, whatever we are scientists from Spain or Finland, so that we have the same norms, we have the same way to do the things, and also to defend us in a way to speak our voice collectively and not individually. And I think to me, this is very important because then this is not us personal scientists that do all of this, but this is institutionalized, it's transparent, everything is written down, everything is publicly accessible, everything can be looked back, reproduced, and that really requires a strong organization like we have today. So I think this is very important to maintain them.
Yeah. I think that we can also connect it to the panels that we had this morning where they said this total transparency of data is so important to make decisions, to be open about everything and to step away from the political part of some things. Norman, you wanted to also give your opinion, and in the meantime my timer is blinking red.
I'll be very quick. I mean, it's a very interesting conversation about faith in the science, and I've had positive experiences of that, and from a management perspective, and negative experience. And a lot of it is actually, communication is actually really important here. And it's also very important about who you're communicating to. Because there are different people in the machine or in the system that have different responsibilities, and you need to think about how that communication is. A lot of the challenges we find is when science says, actually, I found a better way of doing this, and I want to change the model. And that model is directly related to a number that we have to implement from a management point of view that we have to negotiate with a third country. And the industry will sit there and go, yeah, but that's given me a much lower number than I would have anticipated, but I'm not seeing any change in the fish distribution of the fish stocks on a day-to-day basis, but it's because somebody's changed the model.
Yeah.
So that's an important part of the process that we need to also be very mindful of.
Yeah.
Sudden changes because there is, and of course science has to evolve and the modeling has to evolve, and I mean that's the nature of the beast. But how that's then dealt with is actually quite important if it's leading or pointing towards a particular piece of advice, and it leads to quite a dramatic change in that advice just because of the change in the model. So there are things that I think need a little bit of thinking about and a little bit of mapping out in terms of how that process could be handled.
Yeah. Very short, Claus, because otherwise this large hook will appear on the on stage and pull me off, because they're already looking at me very angry.
I'll do it very shortly.
Yeah.
It was just to say that when we talk about distrust in science, we have to also to distinguish between what is science and what is management. I think we have examples. For example, if you have zero-tag advice, then the fishermen can agree that there is very few fish, but whether it should be a zero-tag, that is more of a management decision. So I think we also need to distinguish these two things in discussion.
We have to wrap it up. I'm sorry, Raul, we have to wrap it up, because otherwise I will get problems. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here, for giving your input, and from my side, I still trust you all, with all my heart, really. I trust science in every aspect, so thank you very much for your nice work. And, ladies and gentlemen, I will call out their names, and then you can give a big round of applause. We had Clara Ulrich, we had Ciaran Kelly, we had David Reid, Raul Garcia Rodriguez, Claus Sparrevohn, and Norman Graham. Thank you very much. We are almost at the end, ladies and gentlemen. And then you can still applaud them when they are leaving the stage. Please, please, for all the effort that they have put in. Some closing words from the person who did also the opening of this last session, Head of Unit for Scientific Advice and Data Collection from DG MARE and the European Commission. Please give a warm round of applause for Raluca Ivanescu.
Thank you very much, and I promise I'll be brief because there is a very nice networking cocktail waiting for all of us outside. So, as you've seen, we've heard a number of various perspectives on what good science means and what are the emerging themes. We have looked at the very beginning of our afternoon at what is the current process under the CFP to get to the best available, the holy grail, best available scientific advice. Then what are the challenges, the way we in DG MARE and in the Commission perceive them, but you've also heard from our panelists, how they see the emerging challenges and how they integrate them into the overall functioning of the various scientific settings. I'm very grateful to have heard so many different opinions, also integrating the views of our stakeholders, integrating views of national institutes. That is the right way to go forward, because in the end, our work is all about agility and adaptability, and basically looking into the future based on realities, not on what we think are the things that we should do. So very grateful to our panel for a very rich and very helpful discussion and some very interesting take-home messages. I think it would be interesting to look at what are the key overarching themes that have emerged after our discussions today. So, from my perspective, I take that we need a more agile and responsive scientific advisory system overall. We have many things in place. We have many things that enable us to function quite well, but clearly as we go forward, we may need to step up a bit our efforts to respond faster to fastly emerging needs. So from this particular perspective, I think it's important to recognize this, to put in place the new resources and maybe more adapted resources, but also to make sure that we deliver scientific advice that remains rigorous and trustworthy. So this will be a bit the, let's say, the take-home message for us, but I hope for our partners, at national level. Then the second take-home message, I think, is we need a holistic approach to fisheries management. And as we've heard over the past more or less hour, not obvious to put in place, but clearly needed. And I hope, Dave, I think we will move a bit faster over the next few years in terms of implementing the ecosystem approach to fisheries management. It is very important to understand that integrated management is key, but may take a bit of time to tweak to get it right. And we have to have patience and maybe a bit of strategic thinking in order to get where we have to get together collectively as a scientific community, and not only, and with our stakeholders included. I think also the third take-home message would be that we need to address climate change considerations in the advice. Fully aware that this is not easy either. However, this emerges as a key uncertainty in effectively working in fisheries management. And indeed, as Clara was pointing out, this is not only science, this is absolutely politics as well. And we need to adapt our policies, and why not politics, to the realities of our waters that are very much affected by climate change. So we have to work together with the scientific community to see the best way to integrate climate change into our work. I think we also need to look at how to build trust in the science, what leads to science and the scientific advice. Overall, I think we are doing quite a reasonable job at that. We have many ways in which stakeholders can get involved in the scientific advisory work. And I'll give some examples. I'm pretty much aware that ICES, for example, has a stakeholder engagement strategy. And in the ICES setup, there is a possibility to attend for stakeholders to attend workshops, dedicated workshops, and contribute to specific themes whenever, let's say the topic is well suited for that. I'll give here the example of VMEs. There may have been other that don't come to my mind now. I think for STCF, there is clearly a possibility for stakeholders to participate to some of the working groups. From our side, we have opened more and more to communication with stakeholders. Beginning of the year, we've had an exchange of views with advisory councils to see how we shape up, let's say, commonly agreed scientific priorities. We will continue working along those lines because we want, as I've said, we need to bring stakeholders with us in this journey. And that is a key element of trust. And last but not the least, I think we need to ensure a sustainable scientific capacity. And I've heard what you've said, Clara. I'm happy to hear that you have luxury problems of having maybe too many qualified people applying. Unfortunately, at the overall scale, the situation is a bit more mixed. And for the future, it's very interesting indeed how we can build a community of scientists that is available, that is well qualified for new challenges, and also has, I've heard your message, the right opportunities, the right career opportunities. That is a very important aspect. To conclude, I think, for all of us, it's clear that science is still key for valuable and agile policy making, and we continue working together in that direction. It's very clear that science does not operate in a vacuum, and it responds to policy needs, and it has to be adapted to policy needs, but also it's important that the policies take into account what the science can deliver. And it's also very important that stakeholders remain with us, as I've said, in this journey of shaping up a credible science and workable scientific advice. I thank you very much to all of you who participated here in the room and also online. Thank you very much to our panelists for a very valuable exchange. And as I've said, I invite you all to a networking cocktail at the end of the afternoon and right before the weekend. I think this is the right time. And also, I'm not sure if you had the time to visit the art exhibition that is outside. It may be interesting and maybe also set a good tone for the upcoming weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Ivanescu. And indeed, thank you to our panelists. We're going to ask you, dear panel members, to stay in the room because we're going to have a nice group picture. I would also like to thank a few people. People asked me to thank them, but it is also from the bottom of my heart. I would like to thank the people from VO Europe to put on in all the work for this entire week and for all the effort that they put into it. And also the people from the technical crew who made these events from Monday to Friday a huge success. And I think that they deserve a big round of applause. Like already stated, ladies and gentlemen, art exhibition not to be missed, really, on the first floor. Go there, read the letters to the ocean. Your heart will melt. It is so beautiful. The networking cocktail is here on the ground floor until 6 p.m. You can go to the art exhibition until 6 p.m. There's also the nice photo booth where you can make like nice pictures, happy, crazy pictures. That is a nice souvenir of the European Ocean Days. It was a pleasure presenting for you, and I hope to see you soon at another event, hopefully with a more healthy ocean, with less politics and more policy and more science, and then we move forward. Thank you very much and see you soon. Bye-bye.